In 1900, James Stewart Blackton, co-owner of the Vitagraph studio, released The Enchanted Drawing. The film featured Blackton drawing the face of a man and then appearing to interact with him. This effect was accomplished using stop-action photography, in which the camera is stopped, a change is made, and then the camera is started again. From this method, Blackton got the inspiration for a new kind of film, one comprised completely of drawings. The result was humorous phases of funny faces. It employed an adaptation of stop-action photography known as stop-motion photography. With the new technique, a face is drawn and one or two frames of film are exposed. Then the face is drawn in a slightly different position and then filmed again. The repetition of this process resulted in the apparent motion of the subject, as seen in Blackton's short film. Although Blackton quickly lost interest in animation, his work inspired countless others. Among them was a middle-aged Parisian named Émile Cohl. Cohl's freshman effort, Phantasmagorie, was the first film comprised solely of animation. It was made up of 700 drawings done on rice paper. Each one was double exposed to make the running time longer. Although the film starts with an artist sketching on a blackboard, the animated sequence was traced on rice paper and projected as a negative to preserve the chalkboard effect. Cohl's films were characterized by dreamlike sequences and strange metamorphoses. One among many of Cohl's accomplishments was to combine live action and animation in his film The Man in the Moon. Despite his innovative work, Cohl died poverty-stricken and unknown. It wasn't until the late 1960s that he was recognized as one of the founding fathers of animation. One of Cohl's contemporaries, Winsor McCay, was just as talented an animator, but never entered the film business full-time. McCay produced only a small number of films, but of very high quality. He made a good living off drawing comic strips, which gave him the luxury of pouring more time and detail into his animation, sometimes taking months or even years to complete a single picture. Like Cohl, McCay drew worlds of fantasy and dreams. His first film brought to life his popular comic strip, Little Nemo in Slumberland. The official title of the movie was Winsor McCay, the famous cartoonist of the New York Herald and his moving comics, but became known simply as Little Nemo. Blackton directed the live-action scenes, and the film was released on April 8, 1911. The picture started with a wager that the protagonist, McCay, could not draw the 4,000 pictures in a month necessary for an animated film. After a few comedic live-action sequences, the film evolved completely into animation. One of McCay's greatest accomplishments was conveying 3 dimensions, which he did with no background in his earlier films. Although McCay's sophomore effort, The Story of a Mosquito, seems crude by today's standards, at the time it was a novelty. McCay's animation was so precise that he was accused of tracing his drawings from photographs. He responded to this charge with a cartoon about a dinosaur named Gertie, a work that would go on to become one of the most enduring masterpieces of early animation. McCay used Gertie as part of a live stage act, appearing to interact with her by transforming himself into animation. During the span of his career, McCay produced 13 films, a small number compared to his contemporaries, but of much higher quality. Like Cohl, McCay faded into obscurity towards the end of his career, yet he had a great influence on animators for decades to come. His affinity for black lines on a white background could be seen long after other techniques were perfected. Up until the mid-teens of the 20th century, animation was a highly individualized craft. Artists like McCay and Cohl planned, drew, and often photographed an entire film by themselves. This was all about to change. Enter John Randolph Bray. What Henry Ford did for the automobile industry, Bray did for the animation business. He was originally a reporter and a comic strip artist for various New York newspapers, before setting his sights on the motion picture industry. Bray was a relentless businessman, and at times dishonest. He visited Winsor McCay during the production of Gertie the Dinosaur, claiming to be a journalist writing an article about animation. McKay was very open about his techniques, and Bray later patented many of McKay's methods and then tried to sue him. Bray found McKay's process to be overly time-consuming and impractical. Instead, he decided to find a more efficient way of churning out animated pictures. Bray's new process used zinc etching to print out hundreds of identical background drawings on tracing paper. He left blank spaces to draw in the moving elements, consequently saving numerous hours of retracing time. The first product of this new method was The Artist's Dream, released in 1910. Bray took the picture to a well-known producer, Charles Pathé, who was so excited by the project that he signed a contract with Bray for 6 pictures in 6 months. Even with his new patented methods and full-time staff, it took Bray nearly 6 months to finish his first film for Pathé. Colonial He's a Liar's African Hunt was released on January 14, 1914, followed by subsequent films in March, April, May, and August. Bray's most important contribution to animation was yet to come. He developed and implemented a new method known as the cell system. However, another animator named Earl Hurd had patented a similar technique that used celluloid, an early form of plastic. Hurd's process was ultimately more significant than Bray's. It involved drawing characters on transparent celluloid sheets, which were then laid over painted background scenes and photographed. With the onset of World War I came vast employment opportunities. The government needed training videos, and they called upon Bray to produce them. In order to create detailed, lifelike animation, Bray used a new process developed by one of his employees called rotoscoping, in which live-action footage is filmed, projected onto paper, and then traced over. In August 1919, Bray signed a contract with one of the biggest film moguls of all time, Samuel Goldwyn. The new partnership was mutually beneficial. Bray had the product, and Goldwyn had the means for mass distribution. Among the new novelties announced to be released was a full-color film using the Brewster color method. On February 8, 1920, the first ever color cartoon was released, named The Debut of Thomas the Cat. By the mid-1920s, Bray began to lose interest in animation and sold a controlling share of his company to Goldwyn. By the time Bray's last animated film came out in 1928, he had begun to ease himself into a gradual retirement.